Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Carrie Simpson, and I'm the founder of Managed Sales Pros. With me today is Kevin Damghani, the CEO of IT Partners. And we're going to let Kevin introduce himself, tell you a little bit about IT Partners. And today we're here to talk about how Kevin went from outsourcing to Managed Sales Pros way back in the day. Actually feels like way back in the day anyway, to building a successful in-house outbound team. So Kevin, please give us your stats.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. IT Partners, we're out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've got 19 people on staff now. We saw, thankfully, I know a lot of people, 2020 was a really hard time. We saw a 70% top line revenue increase in 2020. And we're into record territory in terms of sales growth and sales generation. So excited to be here today. It's currently snowing out, while I know that Carrie is somewhere where it's at least 85 degrees.
No, it's unseasonably cold because I'm here. Also, I put on clothes just for you. Just for you guys.
Unseasonably cold at 78 degrees.
Yeah, it's like 76 right now, maybe.
Oh, funny. But yeah, anyway, 2020 was a great year. We grew a lot.
Okay, so you said 70, not 17, correct?
Just 70% top line revenue. Yep. If our bottom line matched that 70%, I wouldn't be here right now, Carrie.
All right. So your top line went up significantly. The bottom line didn't follow. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we're making a lot of reinvestments, strategic reinvestments. We're actually reinvesting in our sales team, and through 2020 was actually the build out of our sales team. So with that being said, we have just been reinvesting our profits back into sales and development.
Okay, so let's go into the Wayback Machine. We're going to go back to when we first met, or you first met Tracy, I think, and you became a client of Managed Sales Pros. I want to say like 2015, 2016. You were probably one of the original dozens. So we're going back a little ways now.
Yeah, actually. So it was 2016. I saw you guys at your booth in DattoCon, Nashville. It was our first DattoCon that we had gone to. And I saw Carrie, I saw Tracy, struck up a conversation with Tracy. What do you guys do? Never heard of the concept of lead generation specifically for managed service providers. I was intrigued. We were pretty small at the time. I want to say we were 3 total employees then. And that being said, we went through a long courtship. Tracy was contacting us, and we didn't have the budget. We didn't have the awareness. It would be a better word. We had the budget. It's just like, what are you going to do today? You're going to do what's important to you. So you only have so much time in the day, and it's wherever you put that time is what's important to you. So everyone has the budget. It's just, are you going to use it for this?
I would say, like, at 3 people, we wouldn't even, we've grown as a business too. We wouldn't work with a 3-person MSP now. Back when we worked with you and you were a little bit smaller, we were kind of like starting out, we were hungry, and we'd work with anybody who would pay us. Now we're about 1.5 to 2 million minimum with a strategic growth plan, because that's who we can succeed for. So just when people are watching, and I don't want people with 3 employees thinking, oh, outsourcing is a good idea. It's probably not.
Yeah.
So we've all learned a lot in the last 5 years.
So there's a lot of truth to that specific statement when you're at that size. But it took us a year. So it was about a full year later when we signed on with Managed Sales Pros. So that takes us into mid 2017. And that's exactly it. At the time, Tracy, which is obviously your sister, for those that don't know on the call, Tracy was very upfront with us on the process to say, hey, look, we're going to take freezing cold leads and take them to cold leads. And it's cold, maybe lukewarm. And it's your job to take them from lukewarm on down the pipe. And at the time, I'm not a sales guy. I'm a tech guy. I don't know anything about sales. I'm like, oh yeah, we could do that. But not knowing what was actually involved in a sales cycle, in a sales funnel, being in a traditional role, we had a lot to learn for sure.
Yeah. So that's so we're marking now 2017 to 2018. So I mean, really, not that much time has gone by. And how many people are on your sales team now?
So we have, well, we just did our sales kickoff and we had 8 total in attendance with myself and my business partner. So 6 dedicated to sales. I would say probably 70% of my time is dedicated to sales. So really 7 if you're going to include me.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is how involved do you have to be in the day-to-day management of those people at this point in the process?
Yeah, I mean, we started 2020 with 1 person in sales plus myself, and now we're up to 7. So that's you know, a pretty big jump. We've dedicated somebody full time in marketing. I shouldn't say dedicated. We hired in somebody full time in marketing, which has been also another game changer. But yeah, I mean, sales is going to be what you make of it. If you just wake up and expect your phone to ring and you don't put any you know, anything behind it, your phone's probably not going to ring. But if you're out there and being strategic about referrals and building your list, building your pipe, your phone's going to start to ring.
So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, so you've got 8 people on your team, on your sales team, including yourself. Let's talk about divisional labor. So do you split your sales team into hunters, farmers, openers, closers? Do you have lead generators, inside sales, field? Like how do you divide who does what?
Yeah, good question. So we actually, in the process of building out the team over 2020, it allowed us to really look through the last quarter of 2020 to say, okay, we've got something here. What is going to be feasible to make this work long term? And we really restructured our sales team. We completely flipped it on its head in terms of putting an actual structure behind it, putting process and a growth plan. So to answer your question directly, we have an executive business development director who oversees the sales team. And that's led by 3 that are on the hunting team. And we work in pods of 3 on the hunting team. So you have a rep, which is going to be doing all lead gen. So they're going and getting the ice cold leads and doing appointment setting. Now, appointment setting is qualified appointments. And I didn't know much about qualified appointments until I worked with managed sales pros. And we've taken that foundation and really made that our own. But qualified appointments, people that have a dominant buy or a determined buying motive and who are ready to actually make a purchase. So that's a qualified lead test. Now that gets fed into our director. And our director is responsible for closing business. Now, when you graduate from a rep before you go to a director, there's a lead position that we've developed. So now this pod of 3 works together. Their commissions are financially incentivized to succeed together. So they work as a team. And then once we grow another lead who's ready to become a director, we're going to now scale into another pod of 3 and build out that lead, rep, and director mentality. So keep replicating that. So that's our hunting team right there. And then in Q2, we're launching our farmer team. We've already have the positions allocated for it. We've made some internal promotions to be able to move into that hunting team. People that have proven themselves on the the farming team. People that have proven themselves on the hunting team. And those, we call them partner development leads or account managers. They're going to be responsible for a quota of 15% MRR growth of a current customer base or partner base year over year.
So their goal is land and expand, or their goal is just expand? Expand.
So the pot of 3 is land, and then it moves over to this team. Right now it's a team of 1 and soon to be a team of 2. Probably in Q3 this year. So I guess that's not super soon, but it'll be a team of 2 that are going to be working with our existing partners. And, you know, our philosophy there to peek behind the veil is they have 4 responsibilities. The first one is relationships. Second is relationships. Third is relationships. Fourth is sales.
All right. I'm pretty good at the 4th one. So let's talk about the transition years, right? You went from half-time outbound asset and maybe questionable or an immature approach to sales development to a point now where you're able to facilitate managing a team of 8, which is a pretty significant jump in a couple of years.
Yeah.
How did you make the decision, 1, that you were going to do it in-house, and 2, how did you make that initial first hire, and 3, did that go well, or did you have to try a couple of times?
Great questions. So I think to frame those questions out, I think the history is important. The history, and it's ironic. I see somebody on the webinar with a very similar company name to how we started. So we were Computer Rescue 911 when we started. And so Computer Rescue 911 was primarily residential small business break fix. We had a managed services arm, and quite frankly, we didn't do it well because the name that we had was attracting a certain clientele. And we had to reinvent ourselves and make some large financial investments to reinvent ourselves to be able to grow and grow well. So we reinvented to IT partners. We were able to put a fresh coat of paint on everything, keep our computer rescue business as a break fix arm, which is now running as its own independent side business. There's a team of 6 over there that just do that. And then IT partners, we broke off and did our managed services. So to go back to your question, now that framework is laid out, is we hired a salesperson under Computer Rescue 911. So when we hired a salesperson under Computer Rescue 911, he had about 7 years of managed services sales experience. He's still with us today. So to answer your other question is, did you have to go through a few? But he really is a great farmer. Hunting, yeah, he can hunt, but that's not a skill set. Closing isn't a skill set. Farming and relationship building is his skill set. So we didn't grow at the trajectory that we were hoping to, but we were growing. And after the first year, that he started to generate an ROI for himself. And so we look at every sales position as a 1-year loss before it even thinks about turning a profit. And that's really a wise approach. Now that we're on number 8 on our sales team, we know that it takes a year or better, a year to a year and a quarter to be profitable. And if you're not profitable out of a year and a quarter, you should be evaluating some changes.
Yeah, we did a little bit of math we were looking at the differences between in-person and Zoom meetings through the pandemic, because traditionally our managed services team had a no-show rate of 0, right? Like if we scheduled a meeting, it's stuck.
Yeah.
Through the pandemic, we started seeing no-shows in the managed services division, which is almost unheard of. And we're not doing anything differently. The only thing that changed was that the meetings are virtual now. And I personally believe that people see less value, and they see it as less like there's kind of an etiquette breach when you bail on an in-person meeting, right? You're making someone drive across town and you're not even going to meet with them. Whereas you don't really see it as inconveniencing them when you don't have to leave your desk and they don't have to leave theirs. So we've had a little bit of a kind of a shakeup, thinking like, hey, how are we gonna deal with this new virtual appointment setting issue that we're dealing with? But we did math, which is where I was going with this, on the cost of appointment setting with an outsourced firm versus an internal company on the first year. So year 1 with a company like Managed Sales Pros, you're probably paying about $6,000 for every deal you close. And if you're doing it internally, you're probably paying $20,000 for every deal you close. So there is like an advantage to outsourcing at the beginning, but perfect world, you're looking at outsourcing while you get your shit together. Ultimately, everybody should be looking at building in-house, right? It's going to be long-term, far more cost-effective. You don't need to pay my margins for longer than a couple of years. You could be building that internally. Most people don't take the time to learn the numbers, learn the process, so let's walk back to that part. Like, you decided you were going to hire someone. How did you, what tools did you choose? How did you choose what methodology you were going to follow? Like, I know that you hired a trainer from a company that I hate, but how did you decide what you were going to do? How did you, was it just random roulette, let's try things, or did you have a strategy in mind?
I'd love to say that I had a strategy in mind and it was all planned out, but Really, I mean, I came from the, like I said, the engineering side, on the technical side, and so I was the one going into the residential houses, fixing uh, all the viruses myself, and then growing through the years. So what stepping back before we hired somebody in sales, that's when we started working with managed sales pros, saying, okay, we don't have a team yet, but if we get the leads, I can go to those meetings and they'll just like me because all my customers happen to like me. And we'll naturally close business because I could just put a quote in front of them and I'm a pretty trustworthy guy. That's not a great sales strategy. I'll tell you that much. So, it was a live and learn. We spent a lot of money with managed sales pros, and it was excellent money that we spent, and it was learning money. Had we not spent that money with managed sales pros, we wouldn't be here today. And that's not necessarily a plug in managed sales pros. Although you guys executed everything that you promised, it was a learning exercise for us because of how small we were. And so, there was a lot of deliverables that said, "Hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z," and we had all those deliverables that were met while working it through that relationship. Then it was after working with managed sales pros, we said, "Okay, we learned a lot. Now let's bring on somebody in sales." And then we let that coast for a minute, and then a minute being a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere in there. And then it's like, okay, we really need to continue to evolve and fuel this fire, because our phone's not going to just ring because we do a great job. Yeah, that'll keep us employed and keep a couple people employed, but that's not going to have a team of people, and you can't scale like that. So that's when we started to really invest in the strategy. And actually, a lot of the things that we worked with or learned from you, for managed sales pros, having Carrie on a phone call to be like, "Hey, look, this is what we're doing," and she's like, "That's bullshit. You should do it this way."
That doesn't
That's
sound like
good
me.
advice. Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all.
That does sound like me. So someone wanted to know, 1 year to be profitable is okay as a target, but when do you know when it's time to let someone go? So that's an interesting question. And I mean, on our side, for example, we look at the numbers. So unless there is like a huge disciplinary challenge, for example, like we are a traction company. So there's a lot of stuff that we just incentivize the behavior that we want, right? We don't put up with tardy employees. We don't put up with absenteeism. You come to work or you find another job, period. Like, I think people would say that we're probably pretty hard line when it comes to the structure in our call center. But if you've never run a call center before, then, go run one and then come back to me and tell me how terrible my management methodology is. There is a way for you to tell on the back end whether or not somebody is building to a point where they're going to be successful versus just wasting your time and screwing around, right? The numbers will tell you that. The data on the back end will tell you that. You can make up just about anything, but you really can't make up call metrics. You could make up the dispositions, but anybody who understands how to read the call center, like a call center platform report, could figure out pretty quickly that somebody was trying to game the system. So on our side, if we're looking at an outbound agent, we expect them to make 100 to 120 calls a day, depending on what kind of program they're on. Of those 120 calls a day, a certain percentage of them are always going to be disconnected calls or bad numbers. A certain percentage are always going to be gatekeeper blocks, and a certain percentage are going to be decision maker discussions. And there's some various and sundry other things that'll go into the dispositioning or the outcomes of the sales calls. Right? If we pick up an anomaly that is, like, we got 7 years of historical data that tell us exactly what the managed services campaign should look like. If we pick up an anomaly, and our system will do that, or our managers will do that, we can go right in, drill into the data, pull the calls we need to hear, and then identify whether or not this is a person that we want to keep on our team, somebody that, maybe just had a couple of bad days, or is this somebody that really needs to go because they're either not a fit with our core culture, which is work hard, get paid, or there is there might be something else going on. Sometimes the list is garbage, right? Like, we imported a list. Maybe the cells shifted on import and every number they called was garbage that day. That's totally possible. But if you don't know what you're looking for, it's really hard to answer that when do you fire someone question. So Kevin, you mentioned you've got about a 1.5-year runway. That's a lot longer than I would keep someone who wasn't performing. So tell us your experience with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at, when I say 1.5-year runway, I'm not talking about just a cold caller or somebody for lead generation. I'm talking about our sales as a whole. Because yeah, you could have 50 qualified appointments that a cold caller gets you, but if you can't close them, that's a different story. Just because you have a qualified appointment, that doesn't mean dollars in the pocket. So some sales cycles are really long. Some sales cycles, and we're in territory where our average sales cycle now is 6+ months, 6 to 8 months, because we're doing a lot in government and larger enterprise, starting to work our way up. Small business, when we were in small business, our sales cycle was give the owner a proposal and walk out with a signature. So I mean, it's a different ball game as you're moving up market. The dollars are bigger, but the sales cycle is longer. So to answer your question, when do you get rid of them? I think you nailed it on the head. You're always going to get an anomaly of you make a phone call and someone's ready to buy right now, but that's an anomaly. So when you're looking at when do you get rid of somebody, I think it really looks at the position. I just had a call today with somebody on our team. It was our sales director, our executive director of sales, and one of the reps, and that rep was hitting the bare minimum daily calls. And so we implemented a quota, which is the bare minimum number of qualified appointments that position needs, and a president's club. So if you're somewhere in between there, you're in good graces. But if you hit president's club, you get the trip to where Carrie's sitting right now, to an all-inclusive in Mexico. But anyway, they were asking, they're like, hey, what if I miss my quota by 5 appointments? Am I going to get fired? And so my response to them was, don't miss your quota. Set your internal quota for 100 appointments more than what President's Club's going to be, and then we won't even have to worry about having that conversation. So it's a mind shift, it's a mind frame. But if that individual, and we said, so in and of itself, if you miss your quota by 5, no, you're not necessarily going to get fired. But we're going to look at it a lot more than that. If you're hitting your minimum calls per day and you're just doing the bare minimum, yeah, you're probably not going to be on the team. But if you're grinding, you're getting 150 calls a day, day after day. Let's say your average call volume is 120 a day. If your average call volume is 120 a day and you're in it to win it and you miss by 5, heck yeah, you're going to be on the team. So it's not just a cut and dry with a number in my mind.
I find it really, really difficult to terminate anyone who comes into work on time every day and grinds it out, right? You're going to pick up the phone all day, every day. I'll help you get better. We've had a couple of people that we just could not keep, right? Sure. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for whatever reason. And firing those people broke my heart because they were hard workers. They just didn't get it. So there's like
absolutely.
There's a skill requirement that comes along with work ethic. But if I had to hire one or the other, I'd go with work ethic over skill or experience every time, right? If I got someone who's willing to pick up the phone, I don't care if you've been to jail. I don't care if you just got out of rehab. We'll figure it out. If you're willing to come in and work hard, it's telemarketing. If you can follow a process, you can be successful at it. So like you said, if you're hitting if all you're doing is phoning it in to hit 100 dials every day, our numbers will pick that up too, because you can see just based on call dispositions, who's not trying to get through the gatekeeper. So the numbers will tell you, is this a training gap, right? Have I not given this person the tools that they need to be successful? Because that's a huge thing that we have to look at, right? Yep. You bring somebody in, you can't just sit them in a corner and say, okay, here's your list, go dial. And I know that a lot of companies early on make questionable decisions that way. They're like, oh, well, this person already worked for a managed services company and they've got lots of experience.
They must be good, right? They must be good.
They can build my sales process for me. As a sales rep my whole life and a telemarketer my whole life, you give me the ability to build my own sales process. I'm going to build it the easiest way that I can, and I'm going to build it the most gameable way possible, right? Like that's my process.
Right.
So it's remembering that you're hiring most of the time, like you hired a sales leader and then you built out below that sales leader. most people aren't making that choice. They're going for a lower cost, probably HR nightmare-ish hire, right? If you're hiring a sales, so let's like just put this right out on the table. If you're interviewing a sales rep that is unemployed, they are unemployed for a reason, right? So you can listen to them all day long, but ultimately you are hiring somebody to fulfill on a process that you have built. You have a sales process and they are there to follow it. You're hiring a worker bee, not a thinker. And I'm not saying that your sales rep shouldn't be a critical thinker, but if your sales rep comes in and doesn't ask you any questions about your process and doesn't ask about quota and doesn't ask to see historical data and isn't interested in learning more about how the person that had the role before them succeeded, this is not a professional sales rep. This is just a mess waiting to screw up your numbers, and you should avoid it at all costs. So professional sales reps work for professional companies that can enable them to succeed and make money.
Yeah. And so to add on that, I'll agree with that completely. And so when we're building out our team, we're getting people right out of college. And so these people out of college, they're hungry. They don't know what they're hungry for, but they're hungry. And so we want those people with that inquisitive hunger. We had to make some changes in our sales team mid-year. I want to say it was in the July, August, September timeframe, somewhere in that neighborhood. We had a cold caller that was right out of college. This was their first career position, just like the other ones, and she was killing it on the phones. She was just killing it. She was setting an average of 2 qualified appointments per day. And she was a day qualified. We have a whole qualified sheet, a point system that they have to meet, and she was just absolutely killing it.
Just so that like the audience here listening knows, if we schedule a meeting a week for our managed services client in a 20-hour time block, that's a good week for us. So 2 a day is almost unheard of. It's exceptional.
Yeah, and we let her go. And we let her go because she wasn't a team player. Her call volume was high. She was averaging 175 calls a day. A lot of days she would hit over 200. We have the whole postcard system that, when you get a lead to a certain point, we hand write a postcard. She's getting all those done. But personality fit is a big piece of it. It's not all about performance, because if you're bringing the other team down alongside of that, that's cancerous, and that has to be recognized too. So performance is huge. Hunger is huge. But if you're going to constantly buck what's in place, and yes, we want to learn, we want to grow, we want to change the process, we want to be fluid, but there's a way to do that and there's a way not to do that. And I think it's important for people who are building a team to know how to pick and retain the right people on your team. If you've got that pit in your stomach for a reason, there's a reason. It doesn't matter if they're the top performer. There's a reason that there's a pit in your stomach.
Yeah, there's that culture fit is essential. Like, you've got to surround yourself with other people all day. You can't, like we used to say on the call, like you can bring energy to the floor or you can take energy to the floor. And if all you or take energy from the floor, and if all you do is pull energy from the floor, we don't need you there. Right? Like we want you bigging up the people that sit next to you. We want you celebrating with the people that are in your row, and we never had a gong or anything because it was loud and we were calling on behalf of other companies. So it's not like we can have like that crazy dynamic when anyone gets there's kind of like a soft clap when somebody goes up. You get to go up and you write your name on the board and there's a little bit of a celebration. And then, the person who gets the most that day, we have like a big trophy that goes on their workstation, and then they pass it on to the next person the next day. So there's little ways to celebrate that success, but we would have people who'd come on the floor just like negative all the time. And that's not core value for us, right? If find the joy is our first core value and you can't ever find it, you're going to have to find the door very quickly. And I'm not allowed to talk to people on the floor anymore, but when I was.
I love that it's your company and your sister puts more handcuffs on you.
I know. Well, we had it was just it was probably 2 years ago because it was Veterans Day. And one of the callers that hadn't been with us, maybe she'd been with us like 3 weeks. She was on the floor and she was bitching to the person that sat next to her, like, I can't believe we have to work Veterans Day. It's a holiday. Blah, blah, blah. And then somebody got up, they came to my office and they're like, this person is not a core value fit. They do not belong here. Like, somebody needs to deal with this. And I'm like, oh, well, tell me what happened. So they walked me through it. I went onto the floor and I'm like, all right, so I understand that there are people here who do not want to work on Veterans Day. Right, you don't have to work any day. Come with me. Let's go. Like, you're gone. So now I'm not allowed to talk to people anymore. And but like that stuff like that, like you don't need it, right? Like, you don't need that negativity. And when you're running a small group of 5 people, you get intimately acquainted with everyone on the team. Everyone knows everything about everyone else's life, right? You're there to support each other. When you've got a team of 30 on the floor and half of them are like bitching all the time, that causes problems. So it's a very different, just like for those of you who are listening today, when you're building your own team, right, you're usually not going to have a team of 30 outbound dialers sitting next to each other in little booths, right? Like, you're going to have a smaller core group of people that you rely on. You rely on each other. You've got these teams of 3, and then there's a career path for them. Telemarketing, there's like telemarketing, better telemarketing, right? There isn't really a step above that. Like, we had a couple of team lead roles, and the commitment that we had to our team was like, hey, you put your time in here, do the job that you need to do, succeed for your clients, and we'll champion you into any company in the channel. And for those of you who are kind of new to Managed Sales Pros, I also owned a US company called Everywhere Managed, and I sold that company in September. Every caller that worked for me at that time is now working, earning double what I paid them with 100% health insurance for different companies in the channel. We hand placed them elsewhere. So we kind of made good on the promise that we made to anyone that came in, which was, give us the best you got and we'll make sure that you succeed somewhere else. And Tracy, of course, has moved on to run the sales development team at Huntress. That's a fairly new development as well. So now I don't have any employees. I don't have to yell at anyone anymore. It's very nice.
And you're in the position we all envy.
In Mexico, hosting webinars?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that. I was just talking about no employees. How nice would that be if we really analyzed it? Make the same amount that you're making now, but
yeah, no, that is really nice. But I mean, I always had a Tracy, right? Like, you decide what's important to you, as you said before. I wanted freedom more than I wanted that margin. So I had somebody to manage the call center, and then I had someone to manage the manager of the call center. Like, I personally don't want to work 12-hour days. I don't want to do that anymore. We did that for a few years. It was okay, but now I'm past that point. So I have a couple of questions that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you, because we just haven't had the chance to talk for a little while. So tell me about your interview process.
So interview process. We do. You're talking about like for reps or tech, or what are you?
Oh,
what are you?
we're going to focus on sales here. You can tell us about all of them if you want, but I want to hear about the sales one.
Yeah, I mean, so on the sales side, we have a lot of interviews. And it's all about right fit. You mentioned you're an EOS shop, which I've known about you, and one of their mottos is right person, right position, or whatever their
right
slogan
person,
is.
right seat. Yeah,
right person, right seat, and that's important to try to get right as best as you can right off the sales or off the get-go when you hire, because if you could place them in the right seat and do enough vetting, that's it. So we're getting a lot of people that are out of college that are applying for our SDR, or I'm sorry, our BDR position, which is the cold calling position. So it's younger people that are relatively new, and they don't have sales experience, and that's okay. We want to teach them. It's all about training, and not just training up front. It's about training every single day. So if you think you're going to launch a successful call team or an inbound team and not have the patience or the dedication or the time to do daily training, you're going to succeed right there. So that's even before we get into hiring. But it's as simple as the old pencil trick. Hey, why is this pencil better than or this pen better than the pen that you're writing down your notes with? And little things like that. Watch them stumble. See if they ask you questions about you. Are they telling you which pen's better, or are they asking you to learn about you and then making a recommendation? You learn so much about personalities just simply based on the questions that you ask. So there's a lot of those questions. We start off, I mean, the process starts off with, we're going to do an impromptu. They apply on the website or whatever the case is. We're going to call you. We're going to try to call you after hours, see if you pick up the phone. We're going to try to call you, at a various time and see if we're important enough for you to stop and take a phone call right then and there. Because, and some people have legitimate reasons. They're in the middle of something. They want to reschedule, fine. But I don't want to set up a formal interview until I've had the chance to vet you, over the phone. So I spend about 15 minutes. I ask them for 5 minutes and I take 15 minutes strategically. And so we'll just spitball. How well can they flow a conversation? Do they sound pleasant on the phone? What am I hearing? What are those nonverbal? Are the pauses at the right time? Am I hearing a chuckle at the right time? Great. You pass that. Now we're going to move to, in COVID, we moved to a Zoom interview and then another Zoom interview, and then we bring you in. So really it's 3 interviews plus that phone call. And that last interview.
For a BDR role.
That's for a BDR role. Absolutely. And that last interview is all about culture.
BDRs? Like, what's your starting rate for the BDR role?
Yeah. So the BDRs, we start them at $40,000, pause, asterisk, and we tier them down over 90 days to $20,000, $20,000. Now we've actually revamped the comp structure where we start at 40, tier them down to 30, and then we want their commission to be the rest. So we're going to give you an OTE to make $52,000 coming right out of college. So OTE, your on target earnings with your base plus your commission, 52 grand. You could make more if you really grind it, but we're expecting your average income to be about 52 all in. Plus we do unlimited healthcare or a fully paid for healthcare and unlimited paid time off. But I mean, unlimited paid time off in that role is different than a tech having unlimited PTO because your livelihood is based on how much you put into it.
Yeah, you really can't generate double your income while you're not at work, period.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I mean, so you got to grind.
Money.
What I love are the people that come in and they're like, all right, so you're going to pay me $30,000. I'm going to get paid on each qualified appointment. Okay. What if I just want a fixed base salary? Okay. You're not hungry. That's what you're telling me. If you aren't confident in yourself, we'll teach you how to be confident in yourself. But if you can't even get there, then it's probably not the right fit on the team. One good question that I always ask for, a sales rep is what motivates you? And, I get these interview answers. Oh, family motivates me. And, being with friends and going to the lake and religion, which are all good answers. But what I want to hear is money. Money motivates me, and I'm a savage. And that's the tones that I want to hear in that interview. What would I love?
It's absolutely not what I want to hear in an interview. So, like, we have some very, very diametrically
funny
processes. But
so I want to hear about yours. I have one other, quick thought on the hiring process. Former athletes, college athletes, high school athletes. They seem to be, they've got the competitive spirit. If you can sense a competitive spirit, that's always a good thing because no sales rep who's competitive wants to be on that leaderboard on the TVs behind you in number 2 or 3.
I've heard that's very common, especially the larger tech vendors look for that. So that's something you have in common with companies like Cisco, right? They're really looking for people who excelled in sports in college.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned my philosophy is different. I'm curious to hear yours.
So when we're call center environment, very different from small tech firm environment, right? I don't even read a resume until somebody shows up in my office to interview. I don't interview people, but we don't interview people on their own either. They come to a group interview. I don't even look at the resumes of the people that don't show up. So we post an ad. We used to waste so many hours reading these resumes, and then people just wouldn't come to the interview, or I know it's just call center environment, different from, you know, you look at your role, you've got some stepping up to do. With us, it's like caller, better caller, really, really good caller, excellent caller, and then they kind of top out. So it's when people come to work for a telemarketing agency, nobody is excited, right? Like nobody thinks, wow, I've done so well in my life and now I'm going to go be a telemarketer. Nobody gets up in the morning thinking, yay, I'm going to get a telemarketing job today, right? Like they're coming to interview here because this is all they've got, right? They've already exhausted all their other options. Nobody wants to be a telemarketer, period, right? Like that's just the reality of the job that we have. So it's my job when people come in to interview with us to get them really excited about the idea of like, one, what's your company culture like? What do we do here? What are we all about? So I tell them my story. The woman that managed our call center, who now is a CEO of her own call center, you know, she was living in her car 3 months before we hired her. Right now, she is running her own call center. That is a 5-year journey that we supported someone through. So most of the people that come work for us aren't excited about the job that they're about to get. They're kind of like, ah, shit, rent's due. I guess I'm going to go get a job or something. And then, you know, they show up and you got to get them super excited about like, hey, here's what we do here. And here's where you could be a year from now. Here's where you could be 2 years from now. Yeah. And then I tell them my story. I was like, I didn't even know what managed services was. All I knew was that I was good at cold calling and I thought people might buy it. Right. So, you know, I went from somebody just sitting in my kitchen, dialing the phone with like a brand new baby and a mortgage and like, God, please let this work kind of thing. Right. I had no credit, no space on my visa, a questionable background. And, you know, now I'm here. So, I mean, you tell people
still with that questionable background, if we're going to be honest.
Huh?
I said, still with that questionable background now, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah. Well, is that a background? And now my life is just, my decisions are just questionable.
So, yeah, I mean, you're spot on. What we do here as part of our interview process, and I didn't touch on that, is paint the picture of that growth. Now, we want to be realistic to say, hey, if you're performing and you're a team and you're fitting into the culture, that avenue to growth is there. But I want to be realistic to say, look, hey, somebody else might get promoted before you if they're bringing their A game and you're not. So I like to be really transparent with that process to try to prevent that bitterness from even forming or taking a stronghold with that growth. And some people will like their position. They don't want to grow. And that's okay too. So we've got, our executive director of sales. He's huge into saying we want people that are hungry to move up the ladder, which is great. There is no question about that. But at the same time, there's some savages. I know some hunters that are savages that just love hunting, and they're darn good at it. And that's okay too, as long as they're performing.
If all I had to do was hunt, that's all I would do. Right? Like, I don't want to go golfing. I don't want to go to dinner. I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to like find opportunities and pass them off to somebody who will then nurture them and pay attention to them. So that was, if you look at the difference between Tracy and I, right? Like Tracy is she can hunt, she can farm, she can all of it. Right. And she was very focused on nurturing leads. Like if you ask anybody in the channel, Tracy knows everyone. And she'll remember your name and she'll remember your birthday. She'll remember what you drink. She'll remember your wife's name. Me, I'm lucky to remember if you're on our client roster or not. Okay. So, I mean, 2 different methodologies, both of them working, right? So there's lots of ways to sell. There's lots of ways to build a sales team, right? But somebody's getting it done over here. So it behooves everyone to think about how Kevin's approaching building up his sales team, because he's in a place right now that most MSPs won't get to. And I'm saying that with authority. We have 80,000 IT service providers in our database at Managed Sales Pros. We've been calling on behalf of, 20 plus vendors for 7 years now. So we know a lot about the market, and there are only 6,000 MSPs in North America that make more than $2 million, right? That's it. So out of the 80,000 people trying to get there, there's not very many people that can boast that they've got an outbound team, let alone an outbound team of 8. So there's a lot of knowledge here. Biggest HR horror story. We got 15 minutes, so I want to like get
Oh my gosh.
Tell me your biggest HR horror story from your sales team.
From the sales team, you know, we're a young team, so we don't have the horror stories like you. I've heard some of your doozies. The biggest one was we had you know, everything shut down for COVID. Everyone's in a panic and a tizzy. It's like we were going to go to all these shows and grow through these shows that we were going to be in, and that got shot in the foot. So when it got shot in the foot, we decided to say, okay, what if lead gen is the way to go, outbound calling. So we bring on the call team in the middle of COVID, train them. We had never made an outbound dial other than hiring it out in our careers, other than the person who it was managing it for us or in charge of it. And so we build this team. And so our office is shut down. It's myself in the office. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. We come back to the office. This is when things kind of opened up again, when the numbers were down. We all came back to the office, and this cold caller comes in, and she had been exposed to COVID. This is when everyone was really freaking out about COVID, and a lot of questions around it. She'd been exposed to COVID, and she comes in, and she's like, hey, I was exposed to COVID. And what should I do? And our executive director's like, you need to leave like right now and call Jonathan or Kevin, which is my business partner, and you know, figure out what to do. So she calls us and she's like, yeah, you know, Kelvin told us to stay, or told me to stay. I didn't really feel comfortable about it and wanted to leave. But we had everything recorded. We record what goes on in that office. They know it too. It was just, you know, complete lies. Then we start digging deeper and just lie upon lie. She exposed our whole office to COVID. Few people got it here. Some of them were quite sick, and it was all just stemmed from a lie. And she knew she was exposed, still came into the office. It was very frustrating.
Here is a thing that we never would have had to have talked about 2 years ago. I'm
exposing people to a pandemic.
Right? Like there's just like the pandemic brought, I mean, I don't want to disregard some of the good things that happened for some businesses through the pandemic, right? Like you put some impressive numbers up on the board during a pandemic. So I don't want to like strip anybody of their rightfully earned props, but it's hard to celebrate that, right? Like you can't really go into a group of your peers when everybody else's numbers are tanking. You're like, yeah, grew 70%, woo. Like you can't, like during a pandemic, it's hard to celebrate the things that you're doing well. So kudos. And if no one else has said how impressive that was pretty impressive. 70% during a pandemic year. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in 2022.
We're shaking. We got some pretty lofty goals and on our sales team. Our expectation is to double in MRR, actually just over double. So we want to grow by 110% in our current MRR, which is pretty lofty and it's pretty scary. And
how does your service team feel about that?
See. Well, our tech kickoff is on the 30th.
Oh, you haven't told them yet.
So in about 11 days. They've heard the murmurings, but yeah, in 11 days they'll really see. But with growth comes more opportunities. I'm really excited for your
sales team. I'm less excited for your service team. But let's talk about the tool set that you're using. What CRM are you using? Do you integrate a voice over IP solution with it? How did you build your outbound stack?
Yeah, good question. So my initial thought was, you know, our PSA is a great CRM. Just use our PSA. Why spend money? And then I got beat over the head by that comment, and we ended up going to HubSpot. So HubSpot's a great CRM, really easy to configure, use.
Marketing and CRM, or just CRM for HubSpot?
No, so our marketing, our person in marketing uses the marketing module. So we pay for both.
Okay.
We pay for both. Discover.org was a way. Actually, that was something that you had turned us on to way back when. Was Discover.org. So we got our list initially from Discover.org. We had done a year subscription with them. before we even had a calling team, which is just asinine. Now that I say that out loud, we spent $33,000 in a year for Discover.org. And
I
had really
absolutely
nothing
would not have recommended that. That doesn't sound like me.
Maybe it was Tracy.
No, Tracy, not like Discover.org. If you were going after co-managed at that time, yes, Discover.org. But if you were doing the 20-50 seat space, so for those of you,
it was co-managed. It was co-managed.
Yeah, so for co-managed opportunities, yeah, Discover.org's a great tool, but a very expensive one. And what I've learned since is that you can go on Fiverr and find somebody that has a Discover.org subscription and just ask them to build any list you want for like next to nothing. So here's a tip and a trick.
My mind's blown. My mind's blown.
Go on Fiverr and tell them like, hey, I want you to get me the name of every IT director of every law firm in Michigan. Thank you. Go do that. And then they'll come back. And the list isn't always perfect, but they'll have access to those things. So you don't have to buy them unless you really want to. I've found if you find the right people. So what I normally do is go on Fiverr and I choose like 4 people to do the same project. And I choose like a small project first, see what quality data comes back, kind of like match it against everyone's data, look to see which one comes in a format that I like, which one of them produces the fastest, which one of them includes the most complete information. And then I can push more business to that person. So there's lots of ways to build lists. You don't need a $30,000 Discover.org membership, subscription, or whatever you call it.
Well, yeah, we had exported a lot of our lists, and that's what started our foundation for the outbound team. So yeah, our VoIP system integrates. Every call is recorded, attached right into the CRM. That's imperative. You need to track your dials. You need to track your activity. You need to see who's doing what. The name of the game's activity. If you're waiting for emails to come into you, that's just not going to happen. You have to be very forward about what your intent is.
So, I mean, that's a key difference between like our callers do nothing but call. There's no email. There's no research. They don't do anything but dial. They don't go to LinkedIn. They don't go to the company website. They don't do anything but dial the numbers that are in front of them. So that's one of the reasons that the volume of our callers is so high. But I mean, if you looked at across an organization, so if you're looking at how you're going to build your outbound program, if you're building it out as say hunters and farmers and closers, right? The hunters on our team don't do anything but dial out. Somebody else sends the emails, so we don't have to worry about somebody's grammar or spelling right? We're representing other businesses. So I can't have an email riddled with spelling errors going out on behalf of IT partners, right? So just because you're a great caller and you've got the drive and the ability to get on the phone over and over again doesn't mean that you can spell. So do I want to give up this great quality, this great person who doesn't necessarily have all of the things that I need to make them into what you would call a BDR, right? Somebody who is responsible for everything. Email, they can call, there is no, we don't even have internal email anymore. When the pandemic hit, we got rid of it.
Wow.
There was no need for people to have it. They don't email clients and they can interact with each other on Teams. So we just what's the biggest security threat? Email. Get rid of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, it's not my problem now. So other questions. So how involved are you? I got to that one. Now you chose a methodology that I'm not a big fan of. How did you choose that methodology? Did that come with the person, or did you seek out a person who had that? Were you looking for somebody trained by Grant Cardone, or did the person trained by Grant Cardone?
No, that would be that was something that was there. Kind of when we were looking for another sales executive at the time, that person came to us, and then we worked together to build this team. Credit to him. I kept shooting down the idea. He kept pushing me hard and really took it on himself to build that team, build the processes. So everything, most of the stuff that I'm sharing with you, it's really coming from this individual who's really just hit a home run with it and found his stride. So it was just like what your story said, is find somebody who is an amazing caller and wants to move up, and we're giving them the latitude to move up and flex their muscle and show really what their worth is, which is awesome.
Yeah, we have found out of all of the, and I'd like to give you an idea of what our turnover was like. before traction, our turnover annually was over 70%. So over 70% of our agents churned every year. To be fair, most of those people churn in training when they realize what the job is, what's going to be expected of them, how intolerant of nonsense we were. So we would lose a lot of people kind of 2 to 4 weeks in. And other than that, people usually stuck it out a little bit. We were able to get that churn down to about 40% in our last year of operations, which was significant. But it's still like that's something to be considered. So for those of you who are thinking about building an inside sales team, churn is going to happen, and process is what prevents it from damaging your company. So if you're thinking about like, okay, what are we going to do process wise? Like the first thing I want people thinking about is where does all your data live? So for Kevin, that's HubSpot, right? So on our desks, there's no paper. You don't get any. Every note you take goes into the CRM. You don't write it on a piece of paper and then put it into the CRM. You put it directly into the tool that you're using, because otherwise you're spending time writing notes. Then you're spending time typing the exact same thing into the box. So the first thing that we're going to help people do is get really good at typing on the fly. They're taking notes, they're talking to somebody, they're getting that information into the system. As you start hiring more and more skilled and experienced people, you kind of have to, from the very beginning, set the tone on, hey, here's what our sales culture is like. We don't do it like that here. Because I don't want a sales rep, like a BDR, okay, but especially a sales rep, I don't want them leaving my office with a leather bound book of every note they've taken on every sales call that they've ever made for me, right? I want my data living in my system where I can protect it and where I can control it. I want my book in my system, right? Like you're spending a significant amount to hire a sales rep. You got to make sure you're not letting them use their you're not giving out, like they shouldn't be giving out their personal cell phone. So you hire a sales rep, you give him a phone, period. You don't let him give out his personal cell phone to your prospects, right? Like every piece of data that your sales team collects belongs to you, and it should be living in a place where you can look at it and do whatever you want with it. And if you decide to get rid of that person, you should be able to pull a plug and disconnect them from every piece of information that you have, right? When you're letting a sales rep bring in their own laptop, bring in their own phone, write down all their notes, bring that book home, you're essentially saying like, hey, I'm going to train this guy up. I'm going to make sure that he's performing really, really well. And if he wants to go work for one of my competitors, well, now he's got the keys to your kingdom, right? Everything you spent 3 years building, this guy has the keys to it now. So really think about what you're going to do to manage those salespeople once you bring them in. Absolutely. Kevin, what are you, do you have a similar policy, or are you like?
So yeah, I mean, everything needs to be in the CRM. And so we initially had a lot of struggle with doing that. And then it's like, no, it's got to go in the CRM. Everything's got to be in the CRM. We really believe to our core that the right technology will help them be more efficient. So if they're more efficient with 2 monitors, a better laptop, make sure you have the headsets that are noise canceling so they can be focused on the call, not the distractions that are going on around. That stuff's really important to really fine tuning and optimizing a sales team, in addition to what you just mentioned. So absolutely. We follow up is the name of the game. If I really had to just summarize something in closing, follow up is the name of the game. If you're calling 3-4 times and being done, we just got their voicemail every time. No, then that's where the postcard comes in. That get creative, connect with them on LinkedIn, figure out when their kid's birthday is, call them. So one of the big things that our sales director is into is, what are the gives? What are you giving? So if you don't have that appointment locked in yet, are you just asking for an appointment? What about a give? Well, you find out this person's a U of M fan, maybe call them and be like, hey, wasn't that a crazy game this week? Yeah, just, I saw it too. Click. Their mind's going to be blown. Like, wait, what just happened? They're not calling to ask me for an appointment. So all that stuff just really drives that relationship, drives those appointments. But yes, I agree with you completely that the data is yours. The data really has to stay in-house for sure.
I think that's just one thing that people don't think about. They think, what's going to be the fastest, cheapest way for me to get this done? And it's like, well, let them use their own laptop. That's something I don't have to, like, no IT company should ever let anybody do that. But companies, when they're building out, they're thinking like, well, how can I get this done like cheaper? Like, this is not the place to do cheaper. Your sales team is not the place to do cheaper. You can find other ways to eliminate some overhead in other areas. If you're going to invest money in something, invest money in this. Invest in doing it right from the very beginning. I can't tell you how much I wish we had done traction in year 2 and not year 5, right? Like, if I had built a solid foundation in year 2, I wouldn't have had to rip and replace every process that we had and everything that we did. So, you know, in year 2, I knew everything. In year 5, I knew nothing. And year 7, I exited. So, you know, a couple of years with the correct processes, and all of a sudden it wasn't such a big deal anymore. We're at the top of our hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time today. Does anyone else have a question for Kevin before I have to let him go today? Should I get my questions out that I made up to ask you in case nobody asked questions?
I think we had 3 or 4 that got answered along the way, which is great.
Yeah, that was kind of a neat feature. I'd never seen anyone do that before. So that's I'm just learning how to use this platform. I really liked it. Any parting thoughts for anyone, Kevin, as we're
yeah, the only parting thought I want to leave is, if you're not growing, you're dying. So go out there.
All right. Well, maybe does anyone have more positive thoughts?
I'm just saying, like, yeah, I mean, your company, if you think about your company,
last.
if you're thinking about your company, I mean, if you're just remaining stagnant, that's stagnant, you're eventually going to lose people with attrition, lose partners or customers. And so always be growth minded. Always be focused on that growth, and whatever growth you want, maybe it's only 2% a year, maybe it's 5% a year, maybe it's 50% a year, but always be in that growth minded stage for sure.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Kevin. It was so great to catch up with you.
Absolutely.
I'll see you back stateside around, I don't know, May, I think.
Oh, I envy you. But hey, thanks for hosting me, and all the best. Stay safe in Mexico.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone who took the time to attend today. I hope you'll join us again next Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday. Next Tuesday, I believe we're at 11. I think Kevin has an obligation that we had to push this down to 3:30 for. So you can register on our website at managedsalespros.com/live streams. And for anybody who wants to share this afterwards, we're going to have this available on our events page probably by tomorrow sometime. So thanks very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
See you later.